Hello, my name is Scott Johnson, and I will be spending the next several minutes speaking with you on the topic of post traumatic stress disorder within first responders. Now, for those of you who may not know, a first responder are your firefighters, your paramedics, your police officers, those men and women who respond to emergencies when you call 911. Now, before I get started, I need to make it very, very clear to everyone who may be watching this that I am not a doctor. I am not a licensed therapist. I am not a psychologist. I am just a man who lives with post traumatic stress disorder every day of my life. Again, my name is Scott Johnson, and I am a firefighter paramedic, and I have been for the past 24 years. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder June 8th of 2017, but through my therapy over the last year, it has been determined by my psychologist that I have been battling post-traumatic stress disorder for over a decade. Um, for me, it was subtle in presentation until it got to the point where I hit an all-time low last year. My wife and I had separated and ultimately got a divorce. I was on a downward spiral professionally and personally that ultimately landed me at the lowest point in my life. And luckily, I just had enough and reached out and got therapy, at which time my diagnosis was made. Now, again, my perspective from this is just my experience, but mine presented very subtly. I had moments of anxiety, anger. It grew to where I was isolating myself in my bedroom or my home because being out in public or in situations that I couldn't control was overwhelming for me. I was having vivid nightmares, reliving certain traumas that I experienced. I was having hallucinations. These things were causing me to be debilitated to a point to where I could barely function, and several times contemplated suicide. Now, in the United States today, there are roughly 3 million first responders. Now, those first responders, um, 30% of them exhibit some form of emotional trauma. Now, that be depression, anxiety, worst case, post traumatic stress disorder. 30%. It's a huge number. What's more overwhelming is the thought that 12% of that 30% commits suicide. These men and women are your first responders that are overwhelmed with their trauma, who can no longer cope with the debilitating presentation of this disorder. The problem is I believe that if they were aware, if someone associated them was aware of the presentation of post-traumatic stress disorder, that more of these individuals who committed suicide could have received therapy and could have lived a long, healthy life. Again, I have been attending therapy pretty rigorously for the past 13 months. Everything from group therapy to cognitive therapy to EMDR. And I can personally tell you that it works for me. There is life after post traumatic stress disorder. Where I'll never be cured of post traumatic stress disorder, I am well on my way of living and coping with post traumatic stress disorder. The thing that I've grown to learn is that I wasn't alone. There are so many out there just like me, and that's in a way comforting that I am not this crazy, unique person who just can't deal with the traumas of my job. First responders are a very proud type A personalities who will not admit weakness. But with the emergence of this epidemic known as post traumatic stress disorder within our community, it is vital that we educate those who are coming up early in their careers to recognize the signs and symptoms so we can get them help before it is too late. Now, again, I am not an expert. I'm just somebody who has lived with post-traumatic stress disorder for a very long time, and I am someone who is receiving therapy on an ongoing basis. And I can tell you that to any of you out there watching this video, you are not alone. And that's very important to know and understand. You are not alone. Uh, do your research, educate yourself, reach out and get help through therapy, through medication. There is life after your trauma. Doesn't mean that you can't do your job. I still do my job every 3 days. I'm very effective at it. I just recognize the signs and symptoms that have led me down the wrong path for so many years. Talk about your fears. Talk about your anxieties. It is not tough to not discuss your feelings. So, again, you are not alone. Thank you for your time. Again, my name is Scott Johnson. Post traumatic stress disorder does not define me.